Today, we have a truly remarkable conversation in store for you. Our guest embodies the essence of what it means to turn adversity into opportunity and wisdom into action. He's a Tennessee Radio Hall of Fame inductee who's been the voice of inspiration for millions, commanding the airwaves as a top-rated radio and television talk show host for over 3 decades. But his impact extends far beyond broadcasting. He's also a Grammy-nominated songwriter, an author, and a renowned motivational speaker. Halloran Hilton Hill. Let's listen in. Hello, Halleran Hill. Thank you so much for being with us on Secret to a Happy Life podcast. I am so excited about today because you are one of the people that are truly inspiring to me, and you have been so gracious to give me some advice, to give me a little friendship. So thank you so much for being here.
Oh, it's an honor to be with you.
So what we do on this Secret to a Happy Life is you are in a place and you prescribe to a lot of happiness. And so the question is how you got there. And everybody's got a story. I've heard pieces and parts of your story, and I'm excited to hear more about it. But it's your story, how you got to where you are now, and the people that influence you, and there's a left and right turn of life that you have no idea how it happens or why it happens, but it did happen. And when you look back, you can see those turns that you made. So it's on to you. Where do you want to start? Let me help you. Let's start from the beginning. What kind of family did you grow up in? How did you start to develop the attitudes and the type of learning attitude that you have about life?
Yeah. So thank you, and thank you for creating a space where people can actually consider and think about happiness. We spend a lot of our lives surviving. A lot of people spend a lot of their lives surviving, and our life experience really is, at its core, the result of our dominant thought patterns. As a man thinketh, so you focus in a certain area in life, and life feels that way. That lived experience. Daniel Kahneman was a lot of real breakthroughs in his work, and he talked about the 2 lives that we have, right? You feel and experience everything, but you don't remember everything. So like if you ask me, what was I wearing on a cold Tuesday in November in Milwaukee, Wisconsin in the 3rd grade, I have no idea. I have no idea what I did that day. I don't know what the worksheet was at school. I no. But I experienced all of that. What I remember of it is based on what I was focused on. And the architecture of our memory really, Kahneman says, rest on 3 things: big moments, changes, and endings, and how you navigate those. And so when I look back on my life and I think about my life experience, you ask me, how does it start? I'm a little boy. My father was a Seventh-day Adventist minister for 50 years. My father's name was Franklin Sidney Hill, the second. And my mother was Lucille Elna Jackson Hill. My father was born in Chattanooga, Tennessee in 1923. My mother was born in Houston County, Georgia, Perry, Georgia in 1925. They were married 60 years or more. And she was a teacher and an educator, and he was a preacher. and they had 5 children. My parents are deceased. They had 5 children, 4 boys and a girl. Franklin, Byron, Franklin, Byron, Roland, Terry. Those 4 came in rapid succession, maybe a year and a half, 2 years apart. And then my parents were like, we got our girl and we're done.
Right. It's complete.
Both of my parents were raised in abject poverty, and their origin stories are difficult. But they stopped having kids, and along the way they had tried to name, both of them had names that they wanted to give their children that the other did not like. My mother liked the name Hallerin. She found it in the Saturday Evening Post, and they would do these novel excerpts in a magazine called the Saturday Evening Post. And this man named Hallerin was the son of a wealthy rancher. The rancher dies just as the son is about to go off to the big city and live the big city life. And he dreamed of having a wife and being successful in business and getting off the ranch or getting off the cattle farm or whatever it was. And he's left with a moral dilemma. Does he stay and take care of his mother and take care of what his father has built? Or does he go off to the big city? And he makes the moral decision that he needs to take care of his family. So he stays. And he is rewarded. A wealthy woman coming through on a stagecoach meets him, falls in love, and the life of the big city comes to him, and he's rewarded because he honored his mother.
Right.
She liked that name. That sounded like
it's a distinctive name, but as it turns out, it's memorable.
But it also sounded like Social Security, right? He's gonna stay and take care of his mama. My father did not. He's like, that name is it doesn't have hard edges on it. He liked the name Hilton, as in Hilton Hotels, and
right.
And he thought it was a very dignified name, and she was not. So, they've stopped having children. It's been 9 years. They don't intend to have any more children. And then all of a sudden, my mother's pregnant. And just a note to everybody watching, if you don't intend to have more children, you might have to stop doing the things that make children.
Right. You should have figured out what caused that by then. All right, so you come along. You're the baby,
and these are the leftover names.
Well, and also they've got some experience by now, and there's no handbook to parenting. And after you had the first 4, you come along 9 years later. They've learned a little bit about how they want to do things, from successes and some failures probably. And so you come along and you've got all that experience and all that wisdom in your parents, and now they're able to focus 100% on you. The 9 years younger.
Yeah, not so much. None of us know what we're doing.
Yeah, there's no handbook, is there?
None of us know what we're doing, and years served does not mean years matured. Years are numbers. Right. So I think my parents were doing the best that they could. But when you look at the forces on their lives, bringing them together and how they were raised and all the things they went through, I think they were doing the best they could. Poverty has a definite effect on the amount of time that you can invest in your children. When you're caught between there's a huge, and that's why I think the work that you're doing is so important, because I think for a lot of people, life is about survival. And that has its own ethos. It has its own rhythm. It has its own agenda. When you're trying to survive, those are a different set of thoughts and actions than the ones that you start to incorporate when you are learning to thrive. I would say.
Yeah, I mean, it's been probably 16 years ago. I went on a mission trip to Nicaragua to a really remote area of Nicaragua. You got to really want to get there, and it's little villages, and these people, they didn't have the proverbial pot to pee in, and they were happy, Hallerin. They were happy. They had a church. Now, if it was a prosperous church, they had prosperous. They had one light bulb, but they were happy. Man, they were joyful, and they were trying to figure out how to eat every day. Yep, they were happy, and the little kids were seriously happy. And it made me start to think that, how can these people be happy when they're struggling this mightily? It's because they had community, they had relationships, they had faith, and they had the attitude that every day was spectacular. And they could make, yesterday might have been bad, but they're expecting today to be good. And it gave me it made me think about it for 16 years. And that's really the reason I'm doing this, is because in 16 years, it's like having an itch that you just keep thinking about every single day. So go on. So you're the baby in the family struggling. Are you still in poverty at that time? He's a minister. She's a teacher.
Yeah, you got 5 kids. He was trying to put his kids through college. My father believed very much in education. But my dad told me he never made more than $27,000 a year in his life. So if that gives you a window into,
right.
So you got 5 children. All of my siblings graduated from college. One earned a PhD. 3 of them earned master's degrees. All homeowners, all raised families. So from where my parents started and from where their parents started, it was a quantum leap. It was Earth. Right. It wasn't Earth to the moon. It was Earth to Mars. So, but the spirit that was placed in me, you asked me about that origin. It had 2 pieces to it. My mother was a hugely creative person, but like many people, she struggled with deep clinical depression. And her joy had an off switch, and it was off a lot more than it was on. She just knew how to find it in the right situation. So most people thought she was a very joyous, ebullient, person, but she wasn't. She was hurting because of trauma in her life.
That's what she saw. That's what everyone saw. But it's behind closed doors, people aren't, they're aren't exactly what they show to everyone in the community. It's a mask in the community of sometimes, and they struggle at home when it's just them. But education was obviously a big deal in your house because all of your siblings and yourself all graduate from college. So that had to be an emphasis growing up.
Yeah. So maybe I can streamline the story a little bit. So I saw my mother. She was a really creative person. And I think part of the way she dealt with the trauma that triggered the depression in her life was she wrote plays and she sang. And so I saw this creativity that I tapped into early on. My father was a very, very quiet, very stoic man who loved learning. And my father loved to read and he loved to learn. And, where some kids are socialized with the baseball or football in the backyard, I was socialized in libraries. My dad went to the library every week and he would get a book or 2. He would take me to the children's section. And I remember he would sit in this upholstered chair in the corner of his bedroom and he read every night. And for the most of the lifetime that I remember, my dad read a book a week. He always had an office at home and just bookshelves and books on top of books. So my father was reading, and he was reading himself out of poverty. He was reading himself into a new life. And in his mind and in his imagination, because he had learned to read, he could learn anything that he wanted to learn, and he could go anywhere he wanted to go. And so I would sit, right next to him on the floor with my little books from the library. And I couldn't read as fast as he could read, but I could turn pages as fast as he turned pages. So I turned pages until my brain caught up, and my brain caught up. And I became very curious. And whenever my parents saw the spark of a passion, they squirted a lot of lighter fluid on it. So I was a very curious kid. So I had erector sets, and I had wood burning sets, and I had electronic sets, and I had chemistry sets. Anything where I could pull something apart, understand it, build it. And we had a piano in the home, but books were central. And I remember we were at the downtown Milwaukee library, which was, kind of an intellectual Taj Mahal for my dad. He reveled in this place, and he took me up to the counter to get my first library card. I remember being a little boy. I remember the library cards were orange. I remember the lady having to take the sheet out. She typed my name. I saw her type my name, and then she took the card out and she put it in the laminating machine, and they laminated the card, and it was still warm when she handed it to my father. And then my father, who called me Deke because he was a preacher, I was his little deacon. He said, "Deke, look at me, son." I turned to my father. He said, "Hold your hands out." And I held my hands out, and like a master jeweler setting a crown jewel, he took the card and he placed it in my hand. I can remember the feeling of the warmth of the laminate in my hands. And he put that card in my hand, and he looked at me and he said, "You know what this means, right?" I said, "What?" He said, "You're free. You're free to learn anything you want to learn. No one can ever stop you from knowing whatever you need to know to get wherever you need to go. You're free." I remember my dad saying that to me.
So what a big moment, man.
And
that's big.
I watched my dad read books, and I watched him, the phrase I use is, I watched him read himself happy. I watched his eyes light up as he was learning new things, as he was breaking the bounds on his life. Now it wasn't until later in his life that I really understood the impact of this, because his father only had a third grade education. His mother had a third grade or third or fourth grade education. And so this was something that not only they didn't have, but it was not available to them. And in just the generation prior, learning was illegal. So if you could just imagine that concept, that learning to read could get you killed. That thought alone. So you have to understand, when my dad was reading books, this is Star Trek, this is boldly going where, right? And it made him so happy to grow as a person. And my dad ended up getting his doctorate degree. And, he was a fascinating intellectual man. And he gave me, when I took this strengths assessment through the University of Pennsylvania and their department that deals with positive psychology, when I did this online assessment, it turns out that my number one strength is love of learning. And my father gave that to me as a kid. And it bred in me an essential optimism that is core to who I am. Watching my mother suffer with depression and pressing through gave me a great compassion and a desire to leverage my gifts to give light into people's lives, to lift the cloud. So that was part of my becoming. It took a long time to get.
Wow.
That's
poetic. I mean, so the whole idea of the generation prior to your father's generation, I guess it was his parents. It was related to slavery, and
absolutely.
and they didn't want you. so that, I mean, that equates to, because lack of learning allows for control,
Absolutely.
so in Europe, it used to be early on that only priests were able to read the Bible. And that was, and because they were the only ones smart enough to be able to interpret it, I guess, is what they were saying. But really what it did is it gave a measure of control over everybody. And it's interesting, something as simple as the ability to read and the access to everything through a library card. It's interesting that is really equated with freedom. And it's a little bit mind-blowing because everybody, from my generation, we take that for granted.
It's not something you have to think about, nor should it be. I remember
but still, I love to read, and I kind of fell into it, not the way that it was for you, but I fell into it on a rainy day when I couldn't play basketball, and I was bored, and my mother was a big reader, and I looked on the shelf, and I pulled the thinnest book I could find from the shelf, which just so happened to be The Old Man of the Sea by Hemingway. And
let me stop you right there before. Let me just stop you. The single book that affected the way I think as a writer is Ernest Hemingway's The Old Man in the Sea.
It's unbelievable, and particularly, I was right at the age where, sports were really influential in my mind. It was all about competition, and that book, part of the framework of that book is baseball and how he would look at baseball box scores and his favorite team. So I related. And then, of course, for every boy, fishing, the idea of fishing and the idea of being on it absolutely hooked me. And no teacher that I had before that, I was probably 15 years old. No teacher I had before that had ever hooked me about reading. I'd read books only because it was required. My mother, even though she was a great reader, she never forced me to read. She wanted to funnel my energy where I felt like it needed to go. But once I read that book, it was like, man, I was on fire for reading, and read a lot since then. And the whole reasoning was just that left turn, right turn of life. Looking on the shelf, that's the thinnest book. Pulled it out. After I read that, I started reading ravenously. So your dad was really created you into a lifelong learner.
Yeah,
basically. But we're encouraged that. And so you were in Milwaukee, Wisconsin at that time?
Born in Detroit, Michigan, lived there a couple of years. We moved to Milwaukee, Wisconsin. That was a big chunk of my life. And I was in Milwaukee. It was.
So in Milwaukee, a lot of racism, or were you in a community that was primarily Black and you didn't experience the racism so much unless you went outside the community?
Yeah, I stayed pretty much in my community, and I don't remember experiencing a lot of overt racism, but I was shielded from it because I was in a bubble. I was in
right. You were in your community,
but I faced a whole within the community that I lived in because of my makeup. I was not the sports kid. I was the bookish nerd, so I got picked on a lot, and so I was picked on and demeaned and diminished. I was with my parents. All of my siblings, my siblings were away. The siblings closest in age to me were at a boarding academy in northern Wisconsin, and my brothers were in college. And so it was just me and my parents. This was probably the most difficult time in their careers and marriage. So they were going through their stuff. And so I remember being very isolated. I remember kids picking on me. I remember feeling small, insignificant. I remember feeling afraid a lot. And so I went into my mind. I went into my creativity. Music became the place. I started writing music, and then I started creating things with my mind. So a blank sheet of paper. My father had a radio show, and he would take me to the radio station with him. And he had tape recorders around the house. He would record his own radio programs at home and take the tapes to the radio station. And he never told me not to mess with his equipment. And so I would make up radio shows. He gave me a little tape recorder, and I would go in the neighborhood. If there was a fight going on down the street, I'd grab my little portable tape recorder and I'd interview the victim and the victor. And I remember kids would come and they wanted to hear the news on my front porch. And I fell in love with communicating. My dad bought me a typewriter.
How old were you then?
I'm probably 9 years old.
Unbelievable.
My dad bought me
Okay. You started your career when you were 9 years old.
Yeah, and I didn't know that, right?
You didn't know that, but
my dad bought me a typewriter, and I started typing scripts. And I remember I would watch these news programs, and I would try to mimic them, and I would type little scripts up for myself, and it was like a thing. At the same time, I've got this great curiosity about math and science, and so I'm going along in my life, and I love this, and I'm trying to run from bullies. I'm trying to be creative. I'm writing music. I'm creating these worlds in my bedroom that I never let anybody know about, basically.
Right.
It was just me in this process of becoming. But more than anything else, I was creating these worlds that I could escape into where I wasn't being threatened or harmed. And it was a magical thing. So fast forward, I go through life. I do pretty good in school. I didn't realize that I had benefited from all of the reading that I was doing as a kid. I didn't know that I was really benefiting from being around parents who loved learning. My mother took me to the University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee, and they would have travel logs on Sunday afternoons that were free to the public. And we would ride the bus over to the university, and we would go to these travel logs. They would have a series of them every year. And these professors that had toured the world would present their films on these different countries. And we would sit there, and they were dry and boring to me, but my mother was trying to hack a world tour. And so I got to see the world and be exposed to all these different cultures. And I was so into Star Trek and trying to figure out how astronauts do what they do. I always wanted to go immediately after going to the travelogues. I wanted to go to the planetarium. So I could, and the guy would tell the same story every week. The chairs would dip back. The domed ceiling would darken. They would turn on the lights. He would explain the constellations and how far they were away in light years and how vast the universe was. And I would just be in awe. And so my agreement was, Mom, I'll go around the world with you if you'll go around the universe with me. And so my mind was I remember just thinking a lot and having ideas. I didn't want to talk about the fight down the street necessarily. I wanted to think, and my dad encouraged me to be a thinker. And so as I think back on it now, Rick, I don't think I ever studied at school. I made great grades. My mother was she was a general, and you had to do your chores and you had to do your homework, and it had to be right, and you did not want to face her wrath. So I don't ever remember school being hard. I don't ever remember it being difficult. So I just go to school, and I was making good grades. So by the time I get to high school, I go away to a boarding academy. And I remember I was maybe I was going into my 11th grade year. I go to this boarding academy in North Georgia, and my GPA, I remember what my GPA was. It was 3.33. And I don't think I had ever studied in my life. I don't think school wasn't.
Showed up to class.
It wasn't hard. So
right.
I remember I was talking to the registrar at this school, And she probably was living in the world that she was living in, believing what she was believing. And we were signing up for courses. And I remember too, in my ninth grade year, I went to a private school in Dothan, Alabama. I believe I was the first Black student to ever attend that school. They tried to give me tests to keep me out of the school. It was a very traumatic situation. And then I ended up at this boarding academy in North Georgia, and I was trying to figure out how to get, what college was going to be like. And I told her I wanted to graduate with highest honors. And I remember that lady looking at me, and she looked at me very lovingly. And she looked at my GPA and she said, well, you would have to virtually get a 4.0 your last 2 years. You'd have to take AP courses. You'd have to really excel. And you got a 3.33 right now. And that's good for you people. That's about.
So let's get real. Let's get real. Let's have some realistic goals.
You don't have it. You and your
so what in the boarding school in North Georgia? What's the interracial mix?
Mix,
or were you the token?
No. There were. It was amazing. There were just a handful of Black students.
Yeah.
There, but I told her to sign me up for everything. Let's go. And I ran into a group of other guys there, young Black guys, who had come from similar backgrounds, and we were roommates and friends, and we made a pact, and we made a pact that we were going to be scholars.
So they were like-minded.
Oh my gosh, these men transformed my life. They were absolutely committed to not only being scholars, but to being great human beings. They are phenomenal. They all have done.
So you guys made the decision when you're going into between sophomore and junior year in high school that, hey, you're going to pursue excellence.
Absolutely. There were 4 of us. We were roommates living next door to each other, and we were called the Cook Brothers, concerned over obtaining knowledge. We had matching T-shirts.
What a bunch of nerds. Cook Brothers. Oh my gosh. All right. So that's great. All right. So you finished high school, and where did you finish then? You went from your 3.3 GPA in high school is, you were doing okay. So where did you finish?
I graduated with highest honors. So, and so did all of the other guys. So,
so your little group, you succeeded in what you set out to do.
Yeah.
And did you ever go back to that counselor or registrar and say, hey?
I don't know that I ever talked to her, but maybe 10 or 15 years ago, I went back to that boarding academy as their alumnus of the year, which was a really interesting thing. But they had a whole weekend celebration, and
still quite the honor. Now you go back, is the racial mix the same as it was when you were there?
Yeah, about the same. So
okay,
it's the reality. But I was really proud of, I think the most significant thing that, there's a proverb that says never underestimate the power of association, right? So when you're in the right cohort of people, if you play with better people, you learn to play better. You know that as an athlete. And I was around some incredible men. To this day, once a year, I meet with those guys. We talk all the time, and they all have been tremendously successful. And I would not have achieved nearly what I've achieved in my life without them. There's no doubt about it. No doubt about it. They were,
yeah.
They were
so they should get maybe individual chapters in the book.
Yes, every one of
them. I'm setting up the outline right now. So you graduate from high school and you make the choice to go to historically Black university.
Yeah, my parents had graduated from Oakwood University. All of my siblings went to Oakwood University.
And that's in Huntsville, right?
Small private university in Huntsville, Alabama, affiliated with the Seventh-day Adventist denomination, and just it was a fantastic experience. It was I met professors and people that were transformative. I mean, just that were, number one, that were brilliant, but that could see and invest in my brilliance. Where this, and I don't know that the woman who said that, the people along the way that said things to me that were demeaning or maybe even racist, I'm not sure that that's what was in their heart. The longer I live, the more I think, you know what you know because you are where you are, and you've been socialized the way you've been socialized. And until you see and know something different, you might be believing that you believe the right thing, right? I was doing an interview with a guy here in town, very successful businessman, and it wasn't until later in his life that he had an awakening, and he's like, I'm wrong about how I see other people. It took him a lifetime to get there. So I don't hold any of that stuff negatively. It might have been propellant when I look back on it. But the distinction of attending that particular university was where she didn't expect greatness from me, and she didn't expect it because she didn't think it was possible. She'd never seen it. My professors at Oakwood University, they knew it was possible. They were relentless in making sure that I knew and acted on that possibility. And so you didn't have the weight of another person's low expectations, because low expectations are an insult.
Yeah, but your professors at universities, they expected excellence, and they pushed you to achieve that.
Right. And they believed Black people could do that. Yeah, that's a real fundamental part of the conversation. It's a difficult part of the conversation, but just the belief that, no, you can do whatever you need to do. Just like my dad here, you're free. You can do anything. So I had one professor, Dr. James Dykes, and he always called me Mr. Hill, always. When I would walk into his classroom, he was always meticulously groomed. I would walk into his classroom, he would go, Mr. Hill, it is a delight to see you today, sir. He referred to me as Mr. Hill. He was really speaking into my future, and it felt so good to just feel respected and safe.
Right. So you had a great learning experience at university.
Yeah, I was there. I was pre-med, as were most of my friends, chemistry, biology, double major, made really great grades, then ran out of money, had to get a job, went to the radio station at the college, and all of my childhood showed up that day I went into the radio station.
Your training.
Yeah. So there was a guy there, his name is Don McFall, transformational person in my life. He had been a record company executive, and he had been a number one radio person in Los Angeles, California. And he had come to the university because he was pursuing the ministry, and they had made a deal with him where they wanted him to run the radio station, and I guess they were working out something for him to get his education, and that was the trade-off. And he ran our college radio station like an LA radio station, and it sounded, if you listened to our radio station, you thought you were listening to the biggest radio station in the world. Oh.
So somewhere along that way, you started changing your mind about going to medical school, and started realizing that your training in childhood and this guy's influence of pursuing excellence in broadcasting, you attached to it.
Yeah, well, I had to have a job.
Maybe when you ran out of money, and so you were forced in that direction, and you were good at it.
Well, I went in and I said, can I read for you? He said, I'm only hiring professionals. I said, well, please, can I read for you? And he gave me some copy, and all those years of typing up scripts and pretending to read copy, standing in the bathroom so I could get an echo, all converged in that one moment. And I read for him for 60 seconds, and he said, can you be here in the morning? And that day I felt something, and I was happy, but then I got all these people expecting me to be a doctor. And
Right.
I wanted to get out of poverty. I wanted to be a plastic surgeon. I was like, I'm going to live in New York or LA. I'm going to live the jet set life. But I remember we were sitting around and we were talking about, when you go to med school, you do the interviews. What do you want to be a doctor for? And they were talking about all this altruistic stuff they wanted to do. And they came around the loop to me, and why do you want to be a doctor? And I said, guys, I want to be rich. And we all started laughing,
Right.
but I realized that was not the reason to be a doctor. That is not the reason to be a doctor. So anyway, I found this passion, Rick, and I decided to change majors, but I didn't tell anybody.
And so you eventually you get out.
Yeah. So the one thing that I do have is that when I'm into something, I learn as much as I can about it. And so, within a year and a half, this guy that was my mentor and that gave me my first shot, he leaves, and the university makes me the manager of the radio station. And I like business and I like operations and I like all that stuff. So I thought I was going to be in radio station management. That's what I really thought. I wanted to own radio stations, build a media company. That's what I thought I was going to do. And so I start managing that radio station. We have success. I become friends with another radio station owner, Mr. Hundley Batts in Huntsville, Alabama. He became a major life mentor and friend. And he started teaching me about business and about life. I ended up consulting. People were wondering, what are you doing down there to make this thing go as such a young guy? And so I started to be invited to consult with other small radio stations on how to make their operations better. And I end up on a consulting trip to the U.S. Virgin Islands, and I present to the board of directors of this small radio station. This guy in the Virgin Islands had one radio station, and his vision was to snap up as many state radio stations throughout the Caribbean and build a radio network, build a radio group. And so I was going to, tighten up the operations of this station and then grow it. And so when I presented
you're doing everything from content to finance.
Oh yeah.
With those stations. Okay.
So I present to them, here's my idea of what you ought to do to take it, whatever. And we're sitting at Bluebeard's Castle Hotel in the Charlotte Amalia Harbor. It's probably 78 degrees with a trade wind. And I mean, it's just beautiful. And he says, what would it take to have you stay here and execute the plan? I didn't want that. I wanted a gig where I could go down twice a year, December, February. and so I threw out the biggest number I thought at the time. They said, if you had your age times 10,000, you were, you did. So I don't know. I think I said 30,000. He said, no problem. And that's when I knew I wasn't a great negotiator, right?
Right.
So I started,
except the first started too low.
So I just started throwing stuff in. I need a car. I need you to pay off my bills. And he said yes to everything. Condo on the ocean, all of this. And so I'm like, I guess I can live rent free and be in the so I remember calling my mother and she said, don't sell your couch. And I'm like, Mom, I'm balling. So we land, and my wife at the time asked the taxi driver, do they have hurricanes here? And he goes, no, dearie, we never have a hurricane. Sometime the hurricane come toward the islands, but the Lord always make them go away. I have nothing to worry about, no problem. And then 8 days later, Hurricane Hugo hits the United States Virgin Islands.
8
8
days
days
to
later.
go down there.
And the tower that went down first in the hurricane was the one at
Your radio station.
And my first order of business is recovering from a hurricane, which meant laying off the staff. And those people needed their jobs. The last thing we should have done. We were underinsured. It was just a thing. And all the dreams turned into nightmares overnight. And it was a magnificent
Yeah.
So we had to rebuild. And I was there close to 2 years. And finally, my wife at the time was like, we got to get someplace safer. I'm out of here. So my sister lived in Knoxville, and we decided to pack up and come to Knoxville. We didn't have anything. I had gotten in with a group of guys that were trying to buy a radio station. They were investors, and they turned out to be crooks. And so I lost my life savings. So I show up in Knoxville 35 years ago with $300. I buy a suit, shirt, and tie cost me $200. I got $100. I'm living in one bedroom at my sister's house. I have a wife and a 1-year-old son, and I have no contacts, and I know no one. I don't know anyone.
Very disappointing.
Yeah, you might.
The initial thought.
You might say that. That's pretty good. Good summary. Yes.
I'm observant, but I mean, from the life in the Caribbean that you thought you were building to suddenly, hey, you got $100
nothing, nobody.
A blue suit.
Nothing, nobody.
And you didn't know anybody, but you chose Knoxville just because your sister was up here. At least that one bedroom.
Yeah, and when I was in boarding academy, our home base was Knoxville. My father was a pastor here in Knoxville, so I knew the city.
Okay, so you were familiar. So you'd had a lot of hopes and dreams, and suddenly it just got crashed, and you're here. Or do you have are you still confident, or are you starting to doubt that everybody said, "Oh, Hallerin, you're fantastic," and suddenly you're saying,
there was a secret sauce inside of me. First of all, I have a best friend. His name is John Wright. And John Wright, I remember him coming to my sister's house, and we're sitting on the front porch and on Brandow Street in Mechanicsville. From her front porch, you could see the sun sphere. We're looking at the sun sphere, and I'm sitting there. I'm like, bro, I got nothing. And he's like, I'm with you, man. I don't care. You're my guy. And I remember I'm sitting there, my eyes welling up with tears, and I said, I'm going to make it. I'm going to make it. Right? They'll know I'm here. I'm going to make it. And this may be one of the most important parts of my story. I have faith.
Yeah.
Faith.
So
no. What I'm about to say to you is really important. I'm about to tell you something really important. I have faith. I have faith. I have something inside of me that is beyond fantastic, because I have a deep reverence for God. It's beyond religion. It's beyond denominations. It's beyond I have a deep faith. I have faith. And I was trying to figure out where that came from, because I said the words, I'm going to make it. I'm going to make it. I used to hear my father say, I'm going to make it. I asked my dad toward the end of his life, Dad, why did you always say you were going to make it? No matter what was going on in his life. And my dad's life was, man, I saw him succeed, and I saw him fail, and I saw him rise up out of the ashes. I saw the brokenness. I saw his imperfections. I loved my dad's imperfections, because it showed me that God loves imperfect people. It showed me that there is a possibility that you could be broken and blessed. And I love knowing that. And I love seeing a man struggle with God. And I said, Daddy, where did you get that? And he said, I used to hear my father say that all the time. I'm going to make it. My grandfather's a little diminutive man. He's 5'3", maybe 5'4", a $125. He doesn't have an education, and he was an orphan. They found him under a house when he was a little boy in Chattanooga. He was raised in the Steele home for children. Elmira Steele was a wealthy industrialist, white woman from Boston. Her husband died. She sit with the ladies of the mission board in her church trying to figure out where they're going to send money overseas to help poor kids. And this is right around the time of Reconstruction. And you have all these abandoned former slaves' children that have nowhere to go. And she says, why are we going overseas? We should go to the South and help these abandoned children. So she builds an orphanage, which was illegal in the state of Tennessee, to serve children of color or disabled children. That was the government would not support that, and it was illegal. And she built one in Chattanooga, Tennessee. It was burned down when she built it by hostile people in the community. She rebuilt it, funded it with her life. They found my father under a house in Chattanooga. They took him to the Steele home for children. Elmira Steele scooped him up, and she started to teach him a trade. And Elmira Steele used to look at my grandfather, and say, you're going to make it. Repeat after me. I'm going to make it. So he said that his entire life. He married Flora Lee, and they had 7 children, of which my father was the oldest. They had no education. They had no money. They raised these children in the middle of the Great Depression. And my father went on to have me and to turn me into a lifelong learner. And the only capital that my grandfather had to give my father was faith. That's it. He had no money. He had no education. He didn't live in a system that supported him becoming any or everything he wanted to be. But somehow he and my grandmother made my father believe that was possible. And they kept telling him he was going to make it. So at my lowest point, one of the things that I relied on is something in my DNA. I didn't put it there. It was who my grandfather was. That DNA got into my father. That DNA got into me. His faith, evident and resident in me at a cellular level, meant that I'm rock bottom. I'm literally metaphorically under a house. And something in me says, I'm going to make it. And without that thing, that spark of optimism, that sitting on the porch that day, that one moment of my life where I go, there was nothing externally to verify that would or could be true. Nothing. I didn't know anyone. I count among my dear friends, billionaires. I've had access to lots of wonderful things in my life. I knew none of that. I just had one thing, Rick, a moment of faith, something that said, I'm going to make it. I wouldn't be who I am without that, because it wasn't the time that I was going to hit it. That wasn't the last, a rock bottom. I get a little passionate about that, by the way, sir.
Oh, yeah, sure. What an incredible inheritance. What an incredible heritage. I mean, the fact that was your grandfather was able to transfer that to your father, who transferred it to your kids, I'm sure. And okay, so now we're gripping because we're in Knoxville now. We're living in your sister's bedroom. You $200 of your $300 on a suit. And you know I'm gonna make it.
I will make it.
So you know. So nothing happens without action.
Next, get on the bus. Get on the bus every day. Get my resumes printed up. Get some business cards. Get a phone book. identify all the media companies, all the advertising agencies, all the organizations that have events, the university
And you make the
marketing department.
rounds.
And you make the rounds. And I start showing up. And I rode the bus to the number one radio station in America, actually, was WIVK in Knoxville. It had the largest market share in America, I think, for market
not just
share
country,
of any radio station.
any.
No radio station had the market share. I think at one point they had a 50 or 60 market share at any given time that a radio was on. Half of them were on that station.
Radio station. But it was a country music.
Sure did.
And you walk in.
Yep.
Blue suit.
Absolutely. Crispy.
In your black skin into the white bastion of America,
Absolutely.
country music. I mean,
Absolutely.
listen, there have been black people that have succeeded in country music, and I can think of only one at that time, and that was probably Charlie
Country
Pride.
music.
Were there other
Charlie
black at that time?
I don't know.
Who was maybe,
but I don't.
But he was a star, a relative star.
Yeah, he was.
He was the only one. So you walk into this station, again, this is nothing against country music radio stations, but at
35
that time,
years ago,
because
30 years ago,
how long?
Probably 30, 35, 36 years ago, yeah. So,
yeah, so that was, of all the places for you to walk in, that was, like I said, that's the white bastion. And you walk in of the country at what that happens time. Then?
Well, I was told by both black people and white people that there's no point of you going there. I went there not because they were one.
Right.
I went there because they were number one.
Sure.
Country had nothing to do with it. I'm like,
no, but it's easy to do the math.
Right. I walk in the door, but you have to consider going to boarding academy, living in Dothan, Alabama. You know, all these experiences I had. I was already and be okay. I knew I could be in any space.
You had prepared for you were already prepared.
I could be okay. So
they might not have been prepared for you, but you were prepared for them. All right, so you
walk in, ask, see the manager. You don't have an appointment. I say, can I wait? And they're like, it doesn't quite work like that. I hear a commotion upstairs. Somebody is upset about something, and then because I'm willing to wait, the owner and general manager don't want to just blow me off, so they just tell me to come in and sit down. I come in, I tell them my story. It sounds fantastical, and it sounds like a lie. Yeah, right, you were whatever.
Right.
And so the more I talked to them, the more they became interested. And they're like, well, we don't have any openings right now. And the people here are long-term, and they're satisfied, and I think it's great that you would come see us. And I hear this lady upstairs, and she wants to leave for whatever reason. And she had a trip planned, I think, to China, and she was upset because she'd been told she was going to work, as I remember it anyway. And I said, well, why don't you use me as caulk? He said, what? I said, I've done everything in a radio station you could do, from being a general manager, reporter, on air. I said, just use me to fill in so you can solve that problem, and I'll help out. And I remember James Dick said to me, well, you haven't said anything about money. And I said to him, I don't get to say anything to you about money until I prove that I can create value. And he was like, what? I said, yeah, I have to create value before we have a money conversation. And he was like, man. So I'll tell you what, you take her to lunch tomorrow. If you can convince her that you would be a suitable replacement, or you would be good to be here, we will consider it. So I go, you got a deal. I leave. I get on the bus. I go home. I call the humanities department at the University of Tennessee, ask for who teaches Mandarin. I said, how do you say good afternoon, good morning, good evening in Mandarin, and something else? I forget the rest of the phrase. They teach me. I practice. I learn everything I can about her, the radio station, all of that. I ride the bus, get to the restaurant an hour early. I'm sitting in the lobby. She walks in. She said, "Are you Hallerin?" Ni hao. She goes, "Oh, I said, "Absolutely not. You know Mandarin?" And she said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm sucking up to you because I need a job." We start laughing. She's laughing. She said, "Tell me about yourself." And she goes back and she says, "You won't believe what this kid did. They bring me back. They hired me on a 90-day probation, $6.80 because I need
Big
an
money.
hour. I need,
Big money.
And for a year, I rode the bus to work every day. Nobody knew it because I'd ride the bus to within a couple of blocks of the radio station, get off and come in the back door. I didn't want pity. I wanted an opportunity. And Mr. James Dick became my mentor and friend. And he said, "What can I do for you?" I said, "Teach me how to think." He said, "Again, you're not talking about," I said, "If you teach me how to think, I'll figure out the money part." And he said, "What does that look like?" I said, "Lunch once a month." He said, "You got a deal." So this multimillionaire radio station owner would take me to Wright's Cafeteria once a month.
Wow.
Sit there and talk about life, and I would take notes. Bobby Denton also became a great friend and mentor. So much so that when both of these gentlemen died, performed their funeral, they wanted me to.
Wow.
So
Yeah. So James Dick, I went to school with his son. So Arthur, and I got to meet. I didn't know him as James Dick. I knew him as Mr. Dick.
we all did.
And what a few times guy he was.
And so he gave me so many opportunities. He put me in front of his friends. He put me into his networks. He put me in Leadership Knoxville. He invited 50 of his friends to a special dinner at Cherokee Country Club so they could hear me speak and so they could meet me. He plugged me into every network that he was plugged into. And he and Big Jim Haslam conspired to give me an on-ramp to do great things. And I was part of the team that helped to bring news talk radio back to Knoxville. And when we got down to what job I was going to do after we put together the team to put it on the air, he said, "Do you want to be operations manager?" I said, would you give me the power to hire and fire? He said, "No, I can't do that." I said, "You do realize responsibility without authority really that's a dead end." And he goes, "Well," he said, "to be frank with you, I think people would struggle following the lead black man." He just told me the truth about leadership and what it was. And I said, "Give me the job that nobody wants." He said, "What?" I said, "Give me the one that nobody wants." I said, "Okay." So I started, producing most of the on-air talk shows, and they gave me an hour, and it started out as an hour, and I think it was an hour and a half every day. And they asked me to fill that slot until they found a real talk show host. And but I was a reporter, I was a news reporter, and I didn't have money for lunch. So I decided that what I would do on my lunch hours, I had the directory of all the city and county officials. And I just decided that I was going to spend my lunch hour having 20-minute get to know me meetings with every single person that was in the directory. So I would go by their office. I don't want anything. I'm not asking for anything. I just want to get to know you. So I got to know every city council member, every county commissioner, every department head. I started to get to know school principals, and I just was going down the list, getting to know and I got to know everybody. So by the time I launched the talk show, my very first guest the first day was Mayor Victor Ashe, the very first time I signed on the air,
Wow.
talk show host, and the guys at the station were like, "How do you have the mayor on the first day?" Well, I've been going to see the mayor for, anyway, it turned into whatever it was. And so now I've had the great joy of being on the air, being in the, I was inducted into the Tennessee Radio Hall of Fame. And I've been a broadcaster, a professional for 45 years now. And
yeah, so they're still trying some replacement in your sleep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a temporary thing, Hallerin. You just extended it just a while, but they're really, really bad at interviewing for that slot. I mean, what a fantastic career with that. And you also got into television, right?
It started a TV show 24 years ago. A friend of mine came and said, "Man, you ought to be on TV." I didn't want to do TV. I had been offered TV anchor positions here in Knoxville a couple of times with a couple of the major TV stations. And it didn't feel like that's where God wanted me. And so having the opportunity to create something and to create a brand that's connected to my purpose, which is throwing light into the world, anything is possible. We launched it, and we're in year 24. We've done well over 550.
Yeah, so the name of that is Anything is Possible. And that, is it an hour show?
30 minutes.
30, and you spend that time where you're interviewing someone, what they have accomplished, right?
Yeah, great stories
and
about
it's anything, and most of them are struggles, and they
many times over
succeeded,
odds,
right?
Yeah, great stories about great people whose lives are proof that anything is possible, right?
Yeah, that's not so far away from the secret to a happy life.
Yeah.
With the exception that I'm not necessarily wanting to focus on necessarily financial success. I'm talking about success in reaching that stage of happiness and contentment, and how you were able to accomplish that, because everybody seeks that. And I was fortunate. I had a contact that knew you, and I asked to him. 2 minutes later, I had you on the phone. That was pretty impressive.
That was well. Linda she and Butch, they're phenomenal people. I would do anything for them.
Well, obviously, because you took she called, she goes, "Yeah, here's his direct line." I called, sure enough, man, you picked up. And then I told you what I was doing. He said, "Yeah, I've been studying that for most of my life." And one of the things that you talked about that I've always thought of, the pursuit of happiness is kind of a philosophy and an attitude. And you pointed out that there's really specific science to seeking happiness and contentment, and turned me on to that, and actually recommended that I look into the courses at both Harvard and Yale. And I've discovered that Harvard they've been collecting data sets for, I think it's 63 years on happiness and how people derive happiness. And the key point that I've seen from them, they're saying that happiness is relationship.
100%.
Whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, if you don't have any relationship, and it can be even as small as going to the grocery store and talking to the checkout person, or going to the bank and talking to your bank teller, but that communication and establishing relationship with someone allows for endorphins in your body to give you good feeling. And even more than that, you don't have to have dozens of people necessarily, but you have to have key people that when something's going on, that you're able to communicate directly with them, and again, they contribute back to those endorphins. So, it's kind of I've always been taught that, hey, you surround yourself with people that are optimistic about life.
I've been blessed. I've had several parallel careers. So while I'm doing radio, I'm also speaking, training, teaching, and I've also been in music and creative arts. All of this has been happening together. First of all, I don't know how comfortable I feel talking about myself, because I think my life really is a function of grace. I am here by the grace of God, and people helped me. I know of a few, but there are probably way more that I don't know about. But I would say that well-being is a skill, and if you don't know how to do it, it's hard for you to do it. And especially if you haven't gotten down to source code, or you don't know how to replicate it. And,
Recipe. Right.
And it's a worthy pursuit. Wealth is not I don't know that wealth will not make you happy. But it's good. I mean, fame is toxic. I wouldn't recommend fame to anyone. It is an illusion. I think it was, what's that guy's name? There's a documentary about him, Supermensch. Anyway, he's a big agent, and he had this famous quote. He said, I've never met a person that fame hasn't left damaged. So I'm not big on fame. Wealth is great, but I don't, but man, if you could pursue deep, meaningful relationships, that's Robert Waldinger at Harvard in the adult health study. That's what they found, is that great relationships keep you healthier and happier. And I failed at relationships, and I'm not a super wealthy person. I've got this localized sort of fame. The greatest thing I have is the love of God and the love of the people in my life. That's the real man.
Well, some of the other things that I've learned along this way, 'cause, the purpose of me doing this was I want to try to affect as many people in a positive way as I possibly can. So this is a medium where I can try to accomplish that. And also, I want to learn something. Those were my two goals in doing this. And I've already, just in this short time, just having conversations and doing research for these episodes, I've learned a lot. And there's some key points that are similar across the board. The whole idea of gratitude, and focusing on gratitude, and relationships, and then faith, because I've talked to people that faith is the center of their life. So they say, how my pursuit of happiness, it's all based on my faith. The other people say it's based on my relationships. Other people say it's me recognizing gratitude for the things that I do have, not focusing on the things that I don't have. And so there's a learning curve with all of this. And so as you have, you've obviously had a really successful career, but aside from the career, the person that you are, you exude gratitude. When I first met you, I said, you are the ambassador of happiness, because you exude gratitude for all the little things in life. I mean, and you've obviously given it a lot of thought. I think that the pursuit is the key. You have to want to do it. It's not something that just, there are some people that we've met that, man, they're just born that way. They're, hey, they've just got a great attitude. It doesn't matter what happened. But for the rest of us, it's something that we have to really try. And I've got my little thing, seek grace, give hope,
16.
allow forgiveness. I tell myself every day. I've been telling myself that for years, since I went to Nicaragua. And for me, that resonates. The seeking grace is living in the moment. The giving hope is lifting up others, and the allowing forgiveness. That's the hardest part for yourself and others. It's easy to say, hard to achieve every single day, but the trying is what has been really helpful to me. So for you, you've had all this great success. You say the center of your being is about faith. What do you think would you tell someone if?
Well, I've had great accomplishments. I don't know that I call it success. But I've been blessed to accomplish some things and to experience some things they're pretty cool. Reverence is, for me, where it starts, that if you can leave space in your life for awe, for reverential awe, it opens you up to so much. Having the practice of gratitude, just kind of making sure that you practice gratitude, that it is a functional daily part of your life. So every morning and every evening I write in my gratitude journal. Not really. I write, the way that it's formatted is you write 3 things for which you're grateful, and you're priming yourself for gratitude. Underneath that, you write down 3 things that would make today great. And that really is about you having an optimistic spirit and believing in agency, that there's something you could do to make the day great. And it's also about creating an expectancy. Then underneath that, you write an affirmation, and it's something about how you want your life to be in the future. So yesterday, I'm dealing with some significant health challenges right now. And I wrote, I am healed, I'm whole, and I'm happy, right? And that was the affirmation. In the evening, when I close out the journal, I write 3 amazing things that happened today, or the highlights of the day. The science behind that is Seligman says we're not Homo sapien, we're Homo prospectus, and we prospect for what we expect. And so if your expectation is negative, that's what you find. It's kind of like if you buy a white car, all of a sudden you see white cars everywhere, and it's not because there's more of them, it's just your perspective shift.
Correct.
So if you start to say to yourself and confirm to yourself that amazing things happen to me every day, or I have the ability to frame anything as amazing because there's something I can learn from that, then you start to expect to find that. And it's really kind of, and it's all brain stuff. And at the very end, you ask, what did I learn today? Or how could I have made life better? And really that habit of priming the brain every day for optimism and for gratitude really is, I ride around and I just find myself in awe, just being grateful for to the present. The simplest things, but gratitude brings you in that moment. Next thing,
there's something about writing it down.
Oh man,
that's versus saying it. Saying it obviously when you write, great. But writing it down, there's some measure of.
That's
a great lesson.
But the other thing about writing it down and writing it every day is, this is the experience that I'm having. I especially like to write in my gratitude journal on my worst days when I don't want to. That's the most important day to write gratitude. Like I make a point when I'm having a horrible day, and I've had this last 6 months it's been tragic actually, right? So I write on the days I don't want to. Next thing I do is I do something creative every day. So I write music every day. 365 days a year, I create something musical every day.
Really?
And yesterday I was over at my, I have a studio here at the house, and I sat down at the keyboard and I literally said, I do not want to do this. I'm just checking a box. I don't want to do this. So let's just be clear about that. But what I do is I let my hand fall on the keyboard. And when I don't feel like doing it, I just put my hand on the keyboard. My hand falls, and whatever sound comes out, I look up at God and I go, oh, that's what we're doing? Okay. And I make something out of that, whatever it is. I don't care what if it's just plunk, then I'm going to make a song built around whatever dropped on the piano, whatever those notes were, that energy
That
was.
is so cool.
And last night, I was sitting there, and the song that came out was just so, it was unbelievable. And so I practice availability. And what's happened for me in doing that is it also affects the way I show up to a day. I wake up some days and I don't want to get out of bed. I don't want to do it. And I lean forward and I look up at God. I don't want to do the day. And I place myself in his hands, and then I go, that's what we're doing today. I'm always amazed at what he makes out of my desperation. Like, I used to think that creativity was a function of inspiration. I don't wait for inspiration. Desperation and perspiration are much more reliable, right? I can always generate a lot of those. And
Right.
so when I show up, and I would say that to anybody watching this, if you'll just show up and do the day, if you'll just show up, and especially it's so important, if you hear nothing I say, if you will give me the best of who you are on your worst days, your better days will be better. So just practicing that habit of, I'm going to do the day. My emotions will not control whether or not I show up. We got an interview today. I'm going to turn off my phone. Rick, you're getting all of it. I'm right here. This is what we're doing. Let's do it. Right. I think having some kind of physical activity every day is huge. I think having a Sabbath every week is really important, where you unplug from the things that drain you and plug into the things that fill you. I think doing your work with excellence, whatever it is you're doing, give it everything you have, from making the bed to mopping the floor to, if you will lean into it and infuse it with joy, but do it with excellence. I think if you turn around and find a way to give something to someone every day, if it's a smile, if it's whatever it is, but to be in the process of giving, and if you can find a way to learn something, if you can always be in the process of learning, I think that platform of habits allows you to have a life experience that's richer, deeper, fuller. The other thing that I would recommend for a happy life is hurt hard, forgive fast, right? You're gonna get beat up. You're gonna hit rock bottom. Relationships are gonna go bad. Divorce was one of the most painful things that happened to me. I hate the hurt that it caused everybody involved. And you will hurt hard, but forgive fast. When somebody does you wrong, forgive them as fast as you can. The hurt may not go away, but if you can find a way to get on the path of forgiveness as fast as you can, it doesn't mean you have to stop hurting, but if you can start forgiving, give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. That cycle of forgiveness is so vital and so important. It's your emotional digestive system. Just like your digestive system, you take something in. If you could never expel the waste, you would go septic. It turns toxic. So this is your emotional digestive system. It's what keeps you alive. And as you live in that cycle of grace and forgiveness, you'll receive more of it. And your response time, your recovery time will get faster the more you practice it. Because most human beings, they are going to let you down. They're going to mess up. They're just not going to get it right every day. They're just not. Neither are you. But if you can hurt hard, don't deny what you're feeling. Hurt hard. Go to therapy. Get the help you need. Forgive fast.
The forgiveness part is I equate it to carrying the load. You gotta offload, because carrying that, you've heard all your life that holding a grudge is the person that hurts is you, and it's true words, because you can't live in the moment when you're thinking about the past, and holding a grudge is always in the past. Right?
Yeah.
So, little opening of your show.
Yeah.
Can you recite that opening?
Oh, yeah.
For me?
It'll be my pleasure.
So let me just tell you, it's really great, and you've been very fortunate, because you have, that training that you did when you were 9 years old. You've got a great voice. You're a great orator, and so when you're on radio, it's a pleasure to hear your voice. Something to behold. So give me that opening.
Yeah. Welcome to this brand new day. This day has never been lived before. It's a blank canvas. If you will it so, it can be your masterpiece. As you start the day, think of 3 things for which you're grateful, and then do the day with all the joy, wonder, enthusiasm, and gratitude you can muster. Hashtag TYG. So I say that every day. I've been saying it every day for over 30 years.
It's fantastic, and I want to tell you, Hallerin, how much I thank you for doing this. This is showing me a lot of grace by committing your time, because I know you're busy, and you're a beautiful person. I'm so thankful that I've gotten to know you, and I look forward to continuing this relationship. For people that are going to be listening into this, and I thank you so much for sharing. A lot of new stuff.
I'm thankful to be here, and thank you for what you're doing to change the world, and to everybody that's taking this in, wherever you are, whatever time it is, you're going to make it.
All right. Thanks, Hallerin. That's a great way to end. You're going to make it. And I will talk to you soon.
All right.
Wow. That was a really interesting conversation. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Hallerin's life story should be made into a book, or I believe a movie. When I asked him to be on the podcast, he said he'd been thinking about what his secrets to a happier life for most of his life. And I think he proved it today in the conversation. Hey, thanks for listening. Please go to secrettoahappylife.com to comment or nominate a guest that you think has a great story about their pursuit of happiness. Download other episodes wherever you get your favorite podcasts. And remember, grace, hope, and forgiveness. Happiness is a choice.